Tak vidím, že už asi všichni máte k dispozici.
So I hope all of you have the technology. Now I would like to start the discussion. My name is Eva Šafránková and I am a representative of TOPAZ think tank, which is the publisher of a book that we will officially baptize here. It's called The Strong Europe in Times of Crisis. I am very happy that we were able to publish it with the help of Wilfried Martens Center for European Studies in Brussels, and we have a representative of the center here who's the co-author of one of the chapters. The other co-publisher was Campus Tivoli from Austria, and the third co-publisher is the Lithuanian think tank Institute for European Rights. And we have the director of this institute here at today's debate. I'm very happy that the book reflects the safety situation in Europe, which changed after the Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine. So we have to think about how we will deal with the safety issues at the institutional level and at the everyday level, fighting hybrid threats and the civil preparedness of our citizens, strengthening of democratic institutions. The book is divided into 3 chapters or sections. One is the reaction to Russian invasion. Second is strengthening everyday democratic institutions. And third one focuses on Ukraine and the reconstruction of it. I am very happy I can welcome here our panelists. On my right, it's George Dimakos, the project manager of Wilfried Martens Center for European Studies. And I would like to thank him for accepting the invitation. Next to him is Theodoras Žukas, director of the Lithuanian think tank Institute for European Rights. In the middle, Maxim Eristavy, Ukrainian writer, cognitive strategist and journalist, currently living in Prague, but originally from Ukraine. Next guest is the political scientist and expert on energy and raw material security, author of one of the chapters of our book focusing on minerals, rare minerals. That's Šárka Vajzová. And the host of today's debate is political scientist Ladislav Cabada. So I give the floor to him. Thank you very much. I hope the mic is on, but it's quite a lot of noise around here, so I hope you can hear me all. Thank you for a nice welcome. You introduced the guest, so I don't have to. And so I'll introduce the script of this debate. In the first 20 minutes, we give 5 minutes to each panelist to present either their chapter in the book or any other topic they want to present. Because the theme of today's debate is a strong Europe in times of crisis. And after that, we'll give a space to a public debate and a discussion. So I would like to keep the order of speakers as they were presented. So I would like to ask George Dimakos from the Wilfried Martens Center for European Studies, and I would give him an opening question. What does the total defense model of Nordic countries teach us, and how can it be applied in Central Europe? Můžete zavřít ty dveře?
Everyone, first of all, thank you very much for the Closer. Yeah, this is one of the issues that I'm going to discuss with you quite easily. I kind of hate this kind of microphones, but it's okay. It is what we have, so I will try to speak closer to the microphone as much as possible. So first of all, I would just like to thank Eva for all her work, Lucy and Sandra, and just to say 2 words, if possible, for the Wilfred Martens Center. We are the official think tank of the European People's Party, established in 2007 from the late Wilfred Martens, the ancient president of the European People's Party. And we are very happy that we are doing this kind of organization with all of our member foundations in Austria, Lithuania, and in Czechia. The idea behind the chapter that we wrote, I co-authored it first of all with my policy director, Peter Heffele, was to, it all started when we saw in the news the amazingly good job that the Swedish colleagues were doing with the preparedness of their civilians. We saw in the news, and it all started when we saw this, the strategic communication package that every Swedish person has received. And in that package, there was a clear line: Sweden will never surrender. And after a discussion that we had, we were like, okay, this is clear. This is exactly what we need to do, and to see if every European country has. In a case of crisis, do you know what is that one message that you want to know? And in the case of Sweden, in wartime, every Swedish person knows the basic. And the basic is Sweden will never surrender. So we thought, okay, let's see what does the Scandinavians have to say about it. They're usually quite well organized. And because during my short, but okay, academic life, I have always been very much passionate about the difference between the Nordic states and the southern European states. I thought, let's see my home country is doing. I'm from Greece, by the way. I live in the not very sunny Belgium, but I come from a very sunny Athens. And then we were like, okay, let's see it. Let's see how it goes. And we compared the 2 models. We compared Sweden, Finland, and Greece. And it was quite striking that what we saw, it had to do with one core message. And this is my core message to you. In order for you to be ready for a crisis, you need to work all the time during peacetime. And this is exactly what Sweden has been doing, and Finland. They have been working, and they have been established a state that works seamlessly like it is in a crisis mode, but it is peacetime. And it is based in some pillars. And the first pillar is that there is a legal obligation, a clear legal obligation, which means that there is a legal framework that establish what a crisis is, but also who is responsible and for what in a crisis. The second thing is the institutional coherence. And there we understood that this has been embedded in multi-annual programs. This is not something that one government introduced and the next government just erase. But this is something that it stays there and is being built there, and it is not partisan, which is as simple as it gets. The state and how crisis and our response to this crisis should not be partisan. And at the end of the time, there was a high level of ownership from the society. Society felt that this is part of their duties and this is part of their everyday life, not something happening exceptionally once. So we saw all of that, and we were trying to think, what is next? Why this is happening? And we strongly believe, and we advocate that in our chapter. There is a benefactor that, how should I say it in a nice way? There is a benefactor that is not exactly a benefactor per se. It's the perception of threat. And the threat and the pressure that these countries, the Nordic countries, have felt from Russia, okay, let's face reality, it has helped them to develop this kind of idea that they need to be always prepared for everything. This is it. But the second part of your question was about the Central European countries. Is that correct? And I think here, and I had a discussion with my director about it as well, because he knows better Central Europe than I do. I suppose it's a little bit more complicated. It's a little bit more complicated because you have the legacy of the post-communist countries. You have this kind of 1999 aversion towards the military, which is understandable to a certain effect. But the Swedish and Finnish and in general the Nordic model, I think it's transferable. And this is what we really believe through this article, that what they are doing is not something difficult or something exceptional, but it is something just smart. And we need to follow the model. A whole of government approach, which means that nobody is left behind, but the whole government works from down to the very top, and a big engagement of the military and the society and the private sector. We have to take into account that how complicated today's societies are, and in that regard, it is without saying that part of our critical infrastructure, it is owned by private citizens. Our networks is owned and operated by private citizens. So this should be embedded in the way that you do your national strategy. This kind of idea that the private sector has a responsibility in case of emergency. At the end of the day, you also need a clear communication strategy to your people. People should know where to look for answers. It is a much more complicated world, and the thing that I'm most afraid, and also coming from the South, is how many voices you are going to hear at the moment of crisis. And in this regard, I think that what the Swedes have done with one clear message, one clear sentence, is absolutely amazing. And this is exactly what we need. So, thank you very much.
Děkuji. Thank you very much.
Now I would like to open the space for the author of another part of the chapter, which is Theodoras Žukas. And the question for him is, how does Lithuania's experience with hybrid threats shape the approach to security across the region, the position of society, various actors in regards to Baltic states, which are very exposed to hybrid threats, not potentially, but actually in reality?
Yes, thank you very much.
It is first of all, wonderful to be here at the International Book Fair here in Prague. We have Vilnius International Book Fair every last weekend of February, which is a massive event, and it is very nice to be here. I must say, perhaps a couple of nice words between what connects Lithuania and Czechia. We do have and we do read very much of Milan Kundera and Havel, all the main authors that are absolutely that were of absolutely immense importance during the 80s and 90s, of course, during the great transformation of both Central and Eastern Europe. The tragedy of Central Europe by Kundera is one of the founding texts at Lithuania too. So we did read it at our seminars and all the other texts that connects our, in this way, shared history of struggling against authoritarianism, against tyranny itself, right? So additionally, it is very nice to represent Lithuania at this panel, right? To represent one small Baltic country, small but proud, of course, that has a quite an experience dealing with hybrid threats, with various intimidations and manipulations, and we could definitely talk about various challenges that we face now, right? The drone incursions into the territory of the Baltic states that are happening almost weekly on nowadays. But perhaps I would like to point out to the positive phenomenon that we experienced in the last 20 years, when we really faced a real hard intimidation by Russia vis-a-vis our energy sector already in the early 2000s, and the decisions that was made back then in the even in the late 90s and the early 2000s to strengthen our energy system and first of all to build our own national oil terminal in order to import oil from the global markets, then to build LNG terminal to do the same exactly, just to import natural liquefied gas from the global markets, and finally to synchronize our energy system and our energy infrastructure within the European Union network that we did finally only a couple of years ago. And what all that package of decisions, of very serious decisions, and of course, you know, energy is a sector which connects huge amounts of finances, of money, and the stakeholders back then were very active in order to safeguard their position. So it was a politically absolutely sensitive question, but finally what all these decisions allowed us to make is that after Russia started its full-scale invasion in February 2022, already in April we were able to completely cut all the Russian imports, any energy imports into our energy system. That was a decision of tremendous importance, I believe. So that is one of the area where we, as Lithuania, we are sort of at the same time are proud of ourselves, and we are very much active in order to sell this kind of a strategy towards our European Union partners. But I think that you know, the general principle is that for us should be, I believe, is that we should understand that this sort of learning how to withstand various hybrid threats is absolutely continuing process. When we still have a neighbor, as we do at this very moment, we shouldn't expect in any near future that all these provocations would stop at some time, right? So this is one of the most important thing, I think, is just to adopt very fastly and strategically and tactically, of course, to any challenges that Russia just continue to put towards our face. I think the nice principle that was raised by the sort of a former investor, then turned publisher and writer Nicolas Nassim Taleb by his books, and he developed this term anti-fragility. And he argued very interestingly, I believe, and very fittingly in this context, is that he argued that we have to create our structures, not only political structures, but any structures, both, for example, a family structure. When the crisis happens, that we wouldn't be only resilient to face this crisis, but that we would be much stronger after the crisis ends, right? That this is the core of the anti-fragility, that generally the crisis would make you stronger than prior to status quo ante. So this is the most important points. I think what really finally was worth mentioning is that right, I believe we have now at this very moment, knowing what is happening in Ukraine, how Russia still pursues this war of aggression against Ukraine, we have a complete transformation of our society in terms of the, sorry to say, the militarization of a society. But I see it as a positive and indeed an inevitable consequence of the situation where we are now. I'm going to have my military service starting in the second part of September. So all of my friends are doing these things. So we have a complete this horizontal transformation of society, which is I believe, well, we are forced to do. Thank you.
Děkuji za prezentaci některých myšlenek.
Thank you for the presentation of some ideas about hybrid threats and issues relating to militarization. Well, I wouldn't say that, but preparing the society to future crisis and strengthening the resilience and condition of the societal structures. The third chapter of the book talks about the energy and raw material security. Theodora spoke about Lithuania being able to cut itself off the Russian energy sources. So it's not only about the critical raw materials, which are important for industries. I would like to ask Šárka Vajsová and talk about the third chapter with a very simple question. Why is access to critical raw material so important? Why they are called that? And how the absence of it influences European societies? Thank you for this question, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. I would like to talk about the critical raw materials. My colleagues prepared the floor for me in this case because they talked about energy safety or security. I will not talk about oil or natural gas, but I will talk about critical raw materials. For those who are not sure what they are raw materials that our industry currently needs, like critically needs to be able to function. Not only industries, but everything around us. That means if we live in the time when we need to increase the production of energy from renewable resources, we need solar panels to be able to produce photovoltaic energy. And for this, we need silica. If we want to use wind power, we need to create the wind turbines. And for those, we need critical raw materials. For electromobility, to produce the batteries, we need cobalt. So all these critical raw materials are those that are critical and key for current industry and our lives, and for renewable energy. Currently, the European Commission and the legislation defined 34 of them. I mentioned some. So it's silica, cobalt, rare earth metals, and many others. I will not name them all, obviously, because I would use up all the time I have. Why critical? Because we need them. We need them for energy transition, for industry. In the case of Czechia, these are really important topics. Almost 75% of GDP is created by export. So if Czech industry didn't export, the Czech economy would fall down. So it's not just to have or not have solar panels, but also that Czech Republic, who is export-oriented, has things to export. We mentioned the critical raw materials first in the EU or in the European Commission in 2008, where the Commission put together a list of them. The list has been changing and reviewing every 4 years. So the materials from 2008 might not be there today, and there might be some new ones. In general, the list of critical raw materials is expanding from 17 at the beginning to 34 currently. It's related to the transformation of our economies and energy systems. In 2008, when we had the first list, it was presented by the Commission as a voluntary list, or a list of voluntary tasks for the member states, which were asked to realize there were some critical raw materials and that they should prepare that in case of crises they should have stocks of these critical raw materials. Over time, the voluntarity became not ideal because the external conditions change, and it called for strategic preparedness over long term and to have a critical raw materials stocks, or to know where the weaknesses are. Also, a problematic point that showed the weaknesses was the COVID pandemics. Also showed the weaknesses of the supply chains. And then the second important moment was the Ukraine war, the Ukraine invasion. And also this accord between Czechia and China, because some of the critical or rare raw materials cannot be found everywhere, only in some countries, and only some countries can process them. So in regards to cobalt that you need for electromobile batteries, the largest amount is found in Congo. So if you need cobalt for batteries, you need to mine it in Congo, in the Republic of Congo. But the country doesn't have capacities for processing the cobalt, and 90% of processing of all cobalt is in China. So most of the Congo stocks go to China, where it is processed, and then in another company, then it goes to a factory to make the batteries, and then it goes into the supply chain. If we look another critical raw material, a nice example is rare earth metals, which we need for mobile phones, wind turbines, and some computer devices. And more than 80% of the sources of the rare earth metals are in China. We know from the past the situations when especially China used the value chain to make some other country to do something. I'm talking about 2010, the China-Japan situation, when a Chinese ship got into the Japanese waters. They wanted to find out what the problem was and wanted to deal with the crew, and China stopped immediately the supply, and Japan managed to cope for only a few weeks, because without the Chinese supplies they couldn't function. another case of powdered graphite, for example, and so on. So it's called critical raw materials because the countries that have big stocks of these can use them to blackmail other countries. So to conclude, I'd say that Czechia is aware of the issues with critical raw materials, but hasn't prepared for this much. But fortunately, we have a new concept of Czech foreign policy. We have a document talking about the necessity of Czech Republic dealing with the critical raw materials and be prepared for bottlenecks in supply chains and deal with this issue as a main security threat. I would love to listen to this lecture for a long time, but we are limited by time. In Czech Republic, we talk about lithium a lot, which also influenced several election campaigns. So you can see this is a live issue. And of course, in case of short or lack of certain materials or raw materials, we need to also talk about circulation. And last speaker is Maxim Restavy. I can see the Ukraine stand here, which I think is very symbolic. I would like to ask Maxim if he can reflect about how the Ukraine resilience against the Russian invasion has is reflected in Europe, and what is the price for democracy and freedom and safety.
Děkuji moc za pozvání. I'm actually surprised why I'm sitting in the center because I had no, I'm not an author on this work. I had no contribution to it, so it's a bit uncomfortable to sit in the center. And my job is actually the easiest one is to offer an opinion because I did read it. And I wanted to support this event because, first of all, I really appreciate the work that you guys do with preparedness and resilience and talking about it in Česko at times where it seems like it became a second priority for politicians or for the government. And unfortunately, it's not as mainstream issue as it should be. And for me, as someone who's rooted both in Ukraine and in Česko as Český občan, for me, it's a story that I feel should be talked about all the time. We've just done some simulations with one of the European Ministry of Defense and Army some time ago, and my team was doing a workshop for them about resilience, frontline resilience. We brought together Ukrainians, brought together Europeans, and we were trying to kind of train to show them that resilience is not just a word, but there is a very specific program, specific job that you guys said need to be done years before that when the crisis hits, it actually works. But they were running simulations and, different strategies, what kind of policies could be there, what kind of approach, what the army does, what the government does, what the civil society does. And then the Ukrainian journalist who was also, helping them to design this simulation, she was telling a story that the region she comes from, there's regular evacuations of villages on the front line happening. And when the evacuation order goes in, you're sitting at home, you get notification that the entire village is being evacuated. But the issue is that you cannot even, for example, name a street or a place where evacuation is going to happen. Because right with Russian bombs falling on this village. There is a cognitive attack on this village as well online, where tries to sow confusion, doubt, fear, panic. So they know that they cannot even name a street where they need to congregate for evacuation because it's going to be bombed. Russians will find the street name, so they have to use names for these streets that only locals know, and some colloquial things. And our European friends at this workshop were shocked that one after another evacuation, despite people being traumatized and fear for their life, it was always ordered and calm. And people knew what to do, where to show up, what to do next, whom to trust, whom not to trust. And they were, in simulations, it would not come up for them. And they were like, okay, this is just, some Ukrainian national trait, a resilient, magical trait that Ukrainians just have, and they're so resilient and so great at it, nobody else will get it. But the truth is that when you watch news over and over again, and you see those bombing sites, there's, of course, trauma, and there's, of course, confusion, but there's always kind of a moment where people always come together, coordinate, talk to each other, coordinate repairs and whatnot over and over again. And it comes not from magical trait. It comes from two things. First thing, that, of course, years of preparation went to it. The war didn't start in 2022. It started in 2014. Since then, the civil society, first and foremost, actual citizens, then the government, the army, worked hard to talk to each other about all these scenarios, what to do, where to go, how to design resilience programs, so on and so on. This is the first thing that, years of preparation goes into it. And unfortunately, Ukrainians paid with actual lives for badly designed programs. But second of all, because people, the society on the level, they have a very crispy, clear understanding of what they're actually facing. And it's, Russian imperialism and Russian colonialism, and not something that we're still missing in our European policy circles. When we talk about preparedness and resilience, we miss the vocabulary to name the threat correctly. And for me, as a journalist, as a writer, if you cannot name the threat correctly, if you do not use the right vocabulary for it, there is no possibility you can design a strategy or a fix to prepare for it. And this is what I would like for us to think today, but also beyond, a bit of helicopter view back. And when we talk about Russia and we name the threat that is the most acute for our countries at the moment, our policy circles usually use words like hybrid threat actor, aggressor, or geopolitical player. But the words imperial, empire, imperialism almost never surface at all. And it does not give you the clear vantage point. What kind of threat I'm facing, how long it's going to take, what are the goals of this threat, and what do I need to do to prepare for it? So,
Thank you. Děkuji za všechny.
Thank you for all the 4 opening presentations. And now I would like to go to the Q&A section. First of all, we look at the 3 parts of the book with some additional questions. And then we'll have time for questions from the audience. The first part of the book talks about security, resilience, and democratic governance. The book argues that the main problem isn't the military shortcomings, or not only, but above all, weaknesses in democratic governance, supply chain, and information space. So I would like to ask Theodoras Djukas and Georgios Dimakos, where specifically did Europe fail, and where did it show that it can function, it can be resilient? And then I have specific questions for you personally. For George Dimakos, you talked about the Nordic countries. They have total defense enshrined in law, in multi-year parliamentary resolutions, in everyday culture. So is it a question of political will or of the structural setup of the state? And then a question for Theodoras. Your chapter describes a diplomatic failure in the months leading up to February 2022, when the West repeatedly was saying what not to do instead of building credible deterrence. Is it still true today? Is there a change, a positive change? And how much? And where can we still see some shortcomings that should be dealt with?
At the same time, right? Okay, first of all, I know that maybe you are going to hate me. I have a little bit of a non-popular view about how did it go as EU in terms of how we reacted to crisis. I think we are very messy. This is the good part about being a democracy, maybe the bad part, but okay, for me it's good that we are messy because it takes time. It takes time to have decisions, to make decisions. It takes time to battle misconceptions that have been here for a long time. It takes time to persuade everyone about the threat. And this is a key problem that I see in general, is that we are a super diverse group of countries, and the perception of threat is just not the same. If you ask a Greek person, if you ask an Italian person, if you ask a Swedish person, if you ask a Czech person, you are going to see different ideas about who is the real threat. And this is something we actually tackle in the book. The threat perception is a driver to actually build structures inside the government to battle against someone, but also to prepare yourself for a crisis. In Greece, and we mentioned that in the book, the threat was never Russia. Right now, the imperialism of Russia has been noted as a threat, but still it's not the main threat. The main threat remains Turkey. This is how the Greek society perceives Turkey. This does not mean that Turkey is a threat. I'm not making any comment about that. I'm just stating the fact. Who perceives what and as what? And for the Greeks, Turkey remains a threat. And actually, if you go and just read some of the major think tanks in Greece, you are going to see that they advocate a lot into even the impact of this perception of threat in bilateral relations of Greece with other countries, including Germany. For example, Greece perceives Germany as very much pro-Turkish. But again, this is about how we perceive threat. And I think that taking into account how different the perception of threat is across Europe, I think that we have done a pretty decent job in terms of how we replied to the crisis when it comes to the Ukrainian, the war against Ukraine by Russia. Now coming to the political will and the political structure, I think you need both. But one follows the other. First, you need to have political will in order to build a structure that is going to be the foundation of your response over time. And this is, again, going back to my first question, to the opening remarks, is what we see in the Scandinavian states. We do not see partisan opinions. We don't see partnerships when it comes to how they address crisis. There is consensus across across the political spectrum about what is the threat perception, how we need to deal with it. And this is embedded into multi-annual programs, is not connected to the electoral circles. And this is quite important for me. And yes, taking into consideration what we need the political will to create the political structure. And the political structures then create the foundation of all, which is culture. You need to have the culture of preparedness. And this is how you actually can engage into managing the crisis. Thank you.
Yes, perhaps starting from the second part of the question and introducing you a little bit about the core idea of my text and the essence of it. Generally, I think that period, the build-up to Russia's full-scale invasion to Ukraine, that started in February 2022, is generally and absolutely event of massive importance. I think in 10, 15 or 20 years, we will be talking about it in the terms of, as we now discuss very historically, I mean, the core events of 20th century international relations history. For example, the July Crisis of 1914, the period of following the killing in Sarajevo, or the event as of Cuban Missile Crisis, right? When the world was literally very close to material extinction, right? So it was of absolutely massive interest to dwell into that period of a 6 months period from the publication of Putin's article on the quote historical unity between Russia and Ukraine, and what kind of arguments he put on that article, right? And as is written in many books, that when the article was published, already in CIA some red lamps went on. Because it was although Putin made very much, various comments on Ukraine, but it was the first time when he was absolutely explicit and on paper denounced Ukraine's right to exist as a sovereign state. So some people already knew that something will happen. Then, October 2021, the CIA it is very interesting what kind of sources the United States possessed at that time in Moscow, because when you read something and there's a saying that CIA knew better than Lavrov what is the plans of Russia, because Lavrov generally is the third-tier player in the structure of Kremlin, despite that he's a foreign minister for already 200 years, right? So that build-up. But the problem was that this kind of very articulated and indeed inaccurate information that generally Western intelligence services possessed about Russia's plan did not follow the strategic deterrence and strategic, diplomatic rhetoric in order to deter Russia. Yes, there were some kind of mostly closed-door comments that were expressed in the medium-ranking level to Moscow. What will be the repercussions if Russia were to invade Ukraine? But generally, already in the second part of December 2021, the West and mostly the United States start to express these very odd comments. I remember them reading very strangely at that time what they will not going to do. That the United States is not going to war with Russia for Ukraine. I mean, that is quite understandable generally in terms of of legal binding treaties. But why to say that out loud when the core essence of strategic deterrence is not to say to your adversary what you're going to do, to put as much pressure and as much leverage that you have on your adversary. And the problem was that I think as United States and the West possessed really tremendous information about Russia's plans. But at the same time, they did not had a clue, I will be harsh here, what Ukrainians are capable of and what will be their capabilities and their will to defend their country. You know, we all know those prognoses about 3 days operation and whatnot. So generally, this was the core idea. And here I come back to my Ukrainian colleague comment about colonialism, about imperialism, and how these kind of old academic terms, already old, 45 or 50 years also, so that's quite old terms, could help us to understand Russia, right? As plenty of countries in Europe, went through this kind of self-reflection on their history. So we need to analyze Russia from this angle too. My final couple of points, right? What we learned about this. I think that still, if we're talking about NATO's strategic deterrence picture, still we're lacking the clear understanding what would be our position if Russia were to start using nuclear intimidation against NATO territory. Small incursion into the territory of, I don't know, Estonia, Finland, Lithuania, whatever, and then, just nuclear rhetoric. Why fight nuclear war over the two kilometers in Latvia or Estonia, right? So this kind of we still do not have a clear picture in Brussels, in NATO, in Mons, what would be NATO's reaction to that. Of course, the present state of transatlantic relations does not help to to picture this kind of strategic framework. So this is one point, and the other point I think that generally the West, if I may say, I believe are still lacking this, structural approach towards, let's say, countries that are not in NATO but are in the territory that could be threatened by Russia. I mean, not necessarily territory, but in that area. I mean, Armenia, Georgia, in a sense, Moldova, of course, some Balkan countries, We still do not have this kind of strategic framework. What would be NATO's position on that? But generally, and the question, for the final question, was about what Europe did right and how they reacted how we reacted after the full-scale invasion. Yeah, of course, one could always have as many complaints as there are. Perhaps we should reconsider the veto right in the European Council. This is the relevant subject. Then the creation of European Union Security Council is the other idea in order to develop this kind of a strategic deterrence and generally strategic political dialogue structure. But I think a lot of things has been done, and after 2014. Countries in East Europe, Baltic countries, we were called sometimes quite arrogantly as one-question countries. When Lithuanian will start to talk, he would start to talk about Russia all the time, and we were, I wouldn't say ignored in the discussions, but we were put aside a little bit. So this era is over, and I'm perfectly happy about that. Thank you.
Děkuji.
Thank you. I would move to the second block, which is the hybrid threats and society resilience. This could be disinformation, cyber attacks, the instrumentalization of migration, disinformation, and so on. So that's the book shows the hybrid warfare and that its many faces. I would like to ask Maxim, who is the most vulnerable in Europe today and most facing the hybrid threats? Is it politicians, journalists, ordinary social media users? Is there the bottleneck meaning the really serious threat. And I'd like to ask Theodoras another question. It's a question of nostalgia, which is a very specific phenomenon in our region. In the last 2 weeks in this country, we've been hearing that the descendants of the removed Germans are the biggest threat and not Russia. So I'd like to ask you how you see this topic of nostalgia, whether you think it's connected to the post-communist legacy or if it's some older idea, or how can we deal with it?
Well, since we're in Prague in Czechia, I remember that several years ago there was a massive crisis inside the country that almost nobody outside the country knows, as the tensions between Romani community and Ukrainian community over several stabbings and incidents that happened. And it was a huge story in Česko for a reason. There were protests, there were fears of inter-ethnic violence and everything. But my team was in parallel studying a very peculiar example. It was 2023, how Russia latched on this topic and started cognitive attack on Romani community, trying to exploit these tensions and try to erode support, public support for Ukrainian refugees and in Česko in general. It was a well-organized campaign. It was targeting just Romani community. It was almost non-visible to anyone else because Romani community is very disfranchised and discriminated within the Czechia. So the rest of the Czech society almost not follows what happens within the community and so on and so on. This is just to the question that absolutely every part of the society that we aim to protect from these ongoing cognitive warfare that is already targeting Česko, European Union, every country on the eastern flank, the more vulnerability is there, the more community feels ignored, the more it's going to be exploited in it. However, I think that for this question, there's a larger category is just missing, because I would say that is everybody, even here, but in Europe at large, is super vulnerable to all of that for two simple reasons. First of all, if you're European and you were educated and grew up and still think that a war is something that happens somewhere else, you're vulnerable. If you're a European who was, who still thinks that such issues, as you rightly point out, like imperialism, colonialism, is also a thing of the past in a history book, you're vulnerable. Since we're in Prague, we've, maybe some of you heard the recent story of the attack on the Czech factory that made drones for Ukraine. And now they're investigating apparent Russian links for these groups and how they were exploited to attack this factory. Česko is also not really, new to the entire thing with Russian sabotage that probably started being tested in the country way before 2022. There was recent Dutch research that for the first time ever in 4 years, it took 4 years for Europeans, but they narrowed down the exact number of sabotage attacks within the European Union attributed to Russia. It was 151 since 2022 alone, and these are confirmed attacks. Russian drones are already violating our airspace. Russian balloons are landing in Poland. I've just read the warning from Institute of Study of War that said that all of these activities that are happening on the eastern flank is already stage 0 of direct confrontation with Russia and the eastern flank. So all I'm saying that if we do not see that kind of picture already, we're all horrifically unprepared. And part of the Russian cognitive warfare targeting actively European citizens at the moment is to infuse that confusion. Oh, Russia won't attack, or Russia is not interested in European Union. Russia is interested only in some Ukrainian territories. When in fact, if you go back to the what we started about the composure and calm of Ukrainians, what they see in this, in all of that is happening, is not Russia trying to get some territories. Russia is not trying to achieve some strategic goals. Russia is an imperial power. And for imperialism, expansion is the only thing you do or you die. There's no other way. And they will expand to the parts where they feel like there's going to be zero costs for them met. Now, they tried Ukraine. Ukraine is not going great. We've seen the revolutionary warfare in Ukrainian standing for 4 years and pushing back actively and, launching the entire warfare revolution on the unlimited budget. So they will try differently in different directions. And what Ukrainians have been telling for the rest of Europe for 12 years, that's going to happen to other parts. It's going to happen to Baltic states. It's going to happen to somewhere else where Russia finds a weakness. Because at the end of the day, the only way to prepare for the war, the only way to kind of build up that deterrence that you guys are talking about is to ensure that Russia sees this and, country and, says, well, that's going to be too expensive to invade anyway. We'll try somewhere else.
Thank you.
Yes, very briefly on that nostalgia issue, I think we could talk in many aspects about the issue, right? Perhaps we could dwell into the social media, on the platforms, how these narratives are being exploited. But very briefly, I just want to touch on perhaps the philosophical background of the issue, and I think that is a problem. Generally, the problem is in ourselves in a way. The problem is about I think that this problem that some layers of society still have some sort of even nostalgia or a positive view towards contemporary Russia or what was then the Soviet Union is sort of an echo of after-war postmodernism, of relativism, of these theses and of these paradigms developed mostly by French philosophers in the 70s and in the 60s, 70s. That there is no objective history, that there is only constructs, narratives, and texts, words like this, right? So we have this sort of an echo and a sort of a longing for cheaper and tastier mayonnaise that they had in the Soviet Union. This book on the wonderful name "Nothing is True and Everything is Possible" about contemporary Russia. That Russia is indeed by the author. Who's the author? Pomerantsev, yeah, Peter Pomerantsev, based in the UK now. He called Russia the most postmodern country in the world, in terms that indeed there is nothing true there in Russia in terms of what is being talked by the government to the people and whatnot. So I think although we very accurately points to Russia, to what is the ambitions of Russia, but I think on this very point we should look at the mirror and to question your own presumptions, assumptions about the world and how we think about the wider world. Yeah.
One second on Peter Pomerantsev, who's Ukraine-born and now works in Ukraine. Brilliant book, but he recently said that what he wrote back then is not that relevant as much. That's why he's leading, helping Ukrainian government to launch a counter-cognitive attack on Russia at the moment, and works with a lot of civil society to design proactive. Because what he said that basically, if we say that, Russia is trying to change someone's minds, or it's postmodern situation where truth is not relevant, we're just engaging in the same conversation they're trying us to engage and create more confusion among us that nothing is basically true. Where in fact, we need to build our own cognitive defenses and have our own story told as a democracies very clearly, which we haven't been doing for a long time.
Děkuji. Třetím okruhem je energetika a
Third block is energy and raw material security. Polish government decided that the key resources from the national plan, they will be used for the Polish Taiwan car factory producing electromobiles. We heard from Šárka Weissová how all actors are dependent on China in Europe for mining, for a country exporting critical raw materials. And the question is, are the European countries prepared for a lack of these raw materials or interruption of supplies? The EU countries are not prepared very much. The aim of the Critical Raw Materials Act issued by the European Commission in 2024 was to make the European countries prepared. It calls on the countries to get a certain amount of raw materials, each country to have the national list of critical raw materials, in the context of the fact that they are not the same for all countries. Some countries have some countries have different industrial strategy and so on. So the central message is to appeal on member states. But what each country does, it's their own thing. In the case of Czech Republic, I think we underestimate the situation so far. We have a temporary list of critical raw materials, but nobody knows what materials we export from where, what the supply chains are. When we look at where we get the materials from, China is not there very much, but third countries. So we export from China through Kazakhstan or through Austria or Switzerland, where they have some daughter companies. So what we're missing here is mapping out the areas. That's a problem with other countries as well. One that has a very good mapping of this is the UK, which is not in the EU anymore. The mapping of supply chains has been done really well in that country, and we should learn from it. In the EU countries, it's quite good in Germany. But one thing is to know where you get the sources from, and second is to make a stock. And I think that's a problem of all EU countries. And the last thing, the European Commission asked the member states repeatedly to start mining these materials where they have them. We mentioned lithium, and we have lithium sources in the Czech Republic. But the problem in the EU is that no one wants to start new mines, no one wants to have wind turbines behind the house and so on. So we know we are dependent on raw materials export. From China or Russia, who are not friendly to EU countries or the Czech Republic. But at the same time, no one wants anything to be mined or built here. So we build a trap for ourselves. If we get new declarations all the time and have it in the foreign relations conception document, it's fine, but we need to make the actual steps. And usually because we as Czechs or Europeans usually stop these steps. Thank you for not a very optimistic picture. I will add a bit. If we agree on opening a mine, it would take about 10 years before it's actually opened. I think more like 15. The new calculations show that 10 years it's just to get a permission, and then it takes another 5 to open the actual mine. So now you can see I'm too optimistic. The second comment is that Bosnia and Herzegovina and Serbia opened new mines, but they are all administered by Chinese companies, which is also very symptomatic. And it shows the strategy of someone who controls most of the raw material market and strengthens its monopoly. I think this is the exact time to open up a discussion and Q&A session from the audience. Good afternoon. In today's political situation, where we see many extremist parties and groups in legitimate governments, do you see a light at the end of the tunnel, that we will not end up as Russia, which is extreme, I know?
Answer. A wonderful article I just recently read at the Financial Times that argues the following. One of the main causes of the rise of the extreme parties, it is generally concluded now, is the social media as such, as giving the, platform for any voices, competent or mostly incompetent voices, to spread their opinion throughout the social media. But what the article argues is that AI is constructed at the moment in completely opposite direction, that it tends to moderate the answers. Just ask the ChatGPT about any policy issue, either, I don't know, education or healthcare, and you will receive a very moderate answer. That sort of concludes various fringe opinions, but generally it is very centristic. So this is the sort of I don't know. The question is to which direction AI will develop itself. This massive phenomena with colossal investments, but it is a very interesting point. The research that was done, that was based on this article, is very deep. It includes various AI tools and various AI platforms. But the conclusion of the article was the following: that generally the AI tends to moderate politics in a good sense. So that's my sort of that's my 2 cents.
Maybe not specific on Czech issue, since I'm not an expert on Czech, not speaking here as an expert Czech politics. But I think my views on, political polarization changed very dramatically after I participated in the Maidan revolution in Ukraine in 2014. Because, before that, I was just an average European, and, we would like, liberal Europeans, far-right Europeans, far-left Europeans, and politics would define the way you see the world in general, right? Who you talk to, who you're not friends with, who you're not friends with. When such like crisis or existential things happen, and you understand that there is like survival of your society and your democracy at stake, at large, as it was in Maidan in 2014, as it was in Ukraine 2022, and now all the politics goes on the second stage, just because to defend the democracy, and this is something is still largely misunderstood, even sometimes in Česko, to defend the democracy in an existential fight, every and single citizen has a job to do. A small job, a bigger job, within the army, within the civil society, within the businesses, everybody will play a small role, and everybody needs to know what they can do in that kind of fight. And when you have this set of mind, you cooperate with everyone. It doesn't mean to, become one mass. It doesn't mean to renew on your values, but disagreement is important for democracy. But the first job is to protect democracy that allows you to have that disagreement in the first place. And this is something, if you follow the news from the Baltic states, follow the news from Ukraine, you see that there is a spectrum of people on the front line all the time, whether on the front line actually fighting in Ukraine or supporting them. They have different views. They fight all the time, having bazillion opinions. In Ukraine, there is a saying that, if you have 2 Ukrainians in one room, in 10 minutes, there's going to be 5 political parties there, and it's still true. But if you threaten them, they become a family. And I think this is something that we're still missing. And to be super practical, when I read the news or I see the news or I live and see the conversations that we have about political disagreements, the most scariest thing that defends and arming our societies and preparing our societies is still a political thing. But if I'm on the right or I'm on the left, my position on this is different. And this is the scariest for me, because this has to be non-negotiable. And if you also say that there's going to be political shared understanding that this is non-negotiable issue, it has to be done. We're not prepared. We're not prepared for modern war. If Russians drones fly, we cannot even shoot them down properly in any way. They can attack all of our infrastructure as they please. And this is the problem that doesn't matter if you're right or left. That's going to be the impact that we're not prepared to handle.
Děkuji, jsem sice pouhý moderátor, ale mohu-li se také pokusit vstoupit.
I'm only a host, but I would like to join the debate as well. We have representatives here of several think tanks, meaning organizations that socialize at least part of the public and give us some ideological framework. Me as a teacher, I would like to emphasize the role of education, public education, schools and also families, and I think they fail in this environment. We talked about the nostalgia. After 1989, we said we didn't want political education at schools because we had this negative connotation of it from before. But now we realize we have no idea how to pack a bag in times of crisis, how to find a direction on a map and stuff like that. These technical abilities should be part of wide civic knowledge, and that we need some tools on which we agree and what to do that it is effective in times of crisis. I think the problem is absence of a critical citizen who looks for effectivity in politicians, in what they do, but not actually what they say. And I think that's a big failure of some parts of our society who like to listen, but do not actually think about what is really done and what are the outcomes of political action. Hello, I'd like to ask Šárka Weissová, what do you think is the prognosis of how long we have the critical raw materials for how many years? And hasn't the fight for these sources started already? Yes, I think the fight has already started and we are in the middle of it. In regards to energy security, this is an issue that started to be dealt with in 2006 when there was the Ukraine-Russian gas crisis, when the Czech Republic saw for the first time what it means. And the second time it was in 2008. We talked with Obama administration about placing the radar and the anti-missile system in Poland and Czechia, and there were. And just these talks stopped the energy supplies for a while. And the Obama administration stopped the negotiation, but because of the US foreign policies. So the Czech Republic started to diversify the sources of oil and natural gas. And now we are in a situation that for 5 years we are not dependent on Russian sources, and we have oil ducts from Austria, Italy, Germany, and also from Poland to Czechia. In regards to natural gas, it was more complicated, but currently we have backflows which originally went from Soviet Union to Europe, and now we have the backflow in reverse. The gas duct we now have also from Poland, and if Czechia has enough contracts of LPG, we should have enough from other countries and not from Russia. One of the important suppliers of LPG was Qatar, but currently we are dependent on US and Canada sources. So apart from oil and natural gas, and we talk about other raw materials, then the situation is more sad. I think we have stocks for days or weeks maybe. Because our economies were based on just-in-time economies. So the idea was for not having any stock, because we will get it just in time. It was changed in 1999. the role was played by the EU, which decided that the member states need to have stock of natural gas for at least 60 days and oil for 90 days of consumption. And with electricity, each member state should have capacity for plus 10% than what the country needs. So for the case of blackout, they would have at least 10% above. If Austria has a problem, then they take energy from us, obviously. You also need a lot of money and legislation to build these structures. It's not very politically popular. We have a system of state reserves, but they usually get penicillin and drinking water, but not nickel, lithium or cobalt. So that's the big weakness and shortcoming of Czech Republic, where we are not prepared at all at the government level. There is no strategy for this. There are some projects, geological projects, trying to make a list of what we should have reserves of. There are new projects trying to find out sources of raw materials in the Czech Republic that we can use. But like I said, opening a new mine will take 10 to 15 years. And that's in case that are no environmental protests and stuff. But from the point of energy, raw material safety, it's quite bleak. Yes, no, anyway, that was... This is the last call for the last question. So because we don't have any more questions, I would like to thank our guests. Thank you for coming and accepting our invitation. So thank you to Georges Dimakos, Theodoras Jukas from Latvia, from the Institute of European Rights think tank. Thank you to Maxim Eristavy to give us the Ukrainian point of view. Thank you to Šárka Vajzová. And also thank you to Ladislav Cabada in the role of a host of today's debate. And thank you to all of you who gave your time to this important debate. You can get our published works in English and Czech. And throughout the festival, you can also visit our TOPAZ stand, HA7. And also I would like to invite you to tomorrow's debate at 5 p.m. And the guests will include investigative journalist Dislava Pokorna or the chairman of Top-09 Matěj Ondřej Havel and the winner of Jan Opletal Award Anna Julie Wittmanova. So I warmly welcome you to this debate, and you can also see the recording of this debate online, so you can also send it to your friends. Enjoy the festival and thank you very much.
Děkuju a ještě pardon, omlouvám se, nezmínila
And also thank you very much for the great interpreting. And also I send hello from the editor of the publication, Mrs. Tungul, and please leave the headsets here by the stand. Thank you.